Thanks for joining me here at 70s Rock Guitar. This episode is about swapping the coils in a Seymour Duncan Humbucker pickup. This is the short version. If you'd like to skip straight over to the part where I swap the coils, you can watch that by just skipping forward. But right now I'm going to talk a little bit about why I swapped the coils, because I think it's kind of interesting. There is a YouTuber named Phillips who said something really interesting at one point. He said, "Gear is not for the audience." Now, at that point, I was watching his video, and I was his audience, and I thought, why is gear not for the audience? And then I realized he's talking about this. As a guitarist or as a performer, when you're performing in front of an audience, they came to see you, they came to hear your songs, they came to see your performance. They don't care what kind of pickups you're using. They don't care what kind of amp you're playing. That stuff affects you. It makes you feel good about your performance, but it doesn't do much for your audience unless it makes a tonal difference or something. Guitarists can be really fickle. They can be kind of egotistical. I don't like to think of myself that way, but I got to admit that I like my guitar a certain way. I want to have certain pickups in my guitar, and I want them to look a certain way. I like double cream coils, where you see two cream coils here. For some reason, that does something for me. Makes me feel better about my guitar. One of my favorite pickups ever for the front position of a Les Paul is a Seymour Duncan Jazz neck pickup. And that's what I've put together here. That's what this video is about. Now I'm going to play it for a moment so you can hear what it sounds like. Here we go. I think it's a great sounding pickup. Seymour Duncan doesn't make double cream coil pickups. They make black pickups, and they make zebra and reverse zebra pickups where one coil is black and one coil is cream. Well, I wanted a double cream coil pickup, and so I had to make one, and that's what this video is about. So here we go. This episode is called Humbucker Guitar Pickup Coil Swapping, short version. Now in this short version, all I'm going to do is swap a couple of coils out on these two pickups. One of these pickups is a reverse zebra, which means that the slug coil, the one with not the screws, but just these metal slugs in it, is the cream coil. And then the other one is just a regular zebra, which means that the screw coil has the cream bobbin. Okay, now what I'm going to do is just really quickly show you the operation that I'm going to be performing here. I want a double cream coil pickup. Seymour Duncan does not make one, and so I'm going to have to make my own. I'm basically going to match two cream coils together from two Duncan Jazz pickups, one zebra and one reverse zebra. Now, if you want to know a lot more about this, you'll want to watch the video called Humbucker Guitar Pickup Coil Swapping and Reconfiguration, the long version. Just really quickly to tell you what happens in that one. In the long version, I talk about building a pickup with mismatched coils, coils that have different numbers of windings on the bobbins. I also talk about how the four color-coded wires, the green, red, white, and black wires, how they're wired up to the coils and some of the tricks you can do with them. I also talk about how the magnet is oriented and how the magnet works in these pickups. And I talk about how to remove that logo if you don't want the logo on your pickup, how you can get that off. You'll want to watch the long version if you want details. In this one, I'm just going to go through the simple operation of just swapping the coils. Okay, let's get started on this. Now, the other pickup I had already messed with before this video. You can see I've disconnected some of the wiring. Now this one came straight out of the box, and this is how they come. The wire is already stripped out and pigtailed, but the leads are not tinned or soldered. You can see that those stranded wires are all splayed all over the place. But outside of that, though, it is kind of semi-ready to go here, and it's got quite a lot of lead length, which, let me just tell you, don't cut these wires. Just use them like they are. If they're too long in your control cavity, then just maybe fold them over a bit and rubber band them, because once you cut it, it takes an act of Congress to get that back together. All right, the next thing that needs to happen is the tape's got to come off. Okay, the outside of these coils, around both coils, is wrapped this friction tape. That's what I'm calling it. It's sort of a cloth-looking tape. And I took the liberty of taking a break and just starting the pull of the tape off of this. But I don't know how well you can see that, but it's kind of a cloth tape or a friction tape that's wrapped around the outside of the pickup. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and peel that off. Now, you don't have to worry much right now. There's always a chance that you could ruin a pickup, but the inside of the coils is also wrapped with some amber clear tape in there. And so at this point, you don't really have to worry too much about hurting the coils. They are wrapped with a very fine magnet wire. It's like 43 gauge wire or something like that. Very thin, thin as a human hair. All right. Now, there is a piece of paper tape in here. It's just almost like masking tape. And it's wrapped around this end because there's a whole bunch of wires. Like on this other pickup, how those wires are all stuck down here at this end. They cover that with this paper tape. So I'm going to go ahead and get started getting that off. All right, I've started pulling this paper tape off, and I'm going to go ahead and finish pulling it off. Again, at this point in the operation, there's not a lot of concern about ruining anything, except that right here, sometimes, okay, this tape is stuck to the wires, and so you want to make sure and get the wires off that tape so that when you're pulling the tape off, you're not pulling these wires. You can ruin a pickup in that way by pulling too hard on these white and black wires. Each coil has a white and black wire coming off the end of it, and you don't want to pull those out or it will ruin the coil and thus ruin the pickup. The paper tape is now off. All right, the next thing that has to happen is the wires that connect the 4-conductor wire to each coil come up here. There's a green, a red, and a white and a black. And the green and red are connected to the white and black of this coil. And then the white and black are connected to the white and black, respectively, of the other coil, the slug coil. So I'm going to get a pair of needle nose pliers and just pull those out. All right, somewhere along the line, I managed to get these really pointy needle nose pliers. Now, each wire from the 4-conductor cable, again, is connected to one of the wires from a coil. And sometimes they tape them together like this. Now, I'm going to just go ahead and pull the tape off of these because I know that I'm going to be using this coil. So I'm pulling the tape off and I'm laying those aside. These two wires are soldered together and they had tape on them. These two wires are also soldered together and they have a piece of tape on them, which I'm going to pull off. And you'll notice that I hold the wires with one hand while I pull the tape off with the other so that I'm not putting a lot of pressure on the wire. Okay, I've still got 2 wires to go, and these were probably stuffed down in there as well, but those wires are stuffed down in between the coils. That's what they almost always do. And so you have to be a little bit careful getting them out. I'm going to go ahead and pull these wires out from between the coils. There they go. And now I've got the other 2. Since I'm not going to be using this coil, I'm only using the cream coils, I'm going to go ahead and leave those connected. But I do want to disconnect these 2 that are going to the cream coil that I want. So I'm going to get my soldering iron and I'm going to desolder these connections. I'll show you how. What we're trying to do here is remove this cream coil. I want to get rid of these electrical connections and also take these screws out on the bottom so that this coil can be electrically and physically removed from this pickup. And the reason is so that I can mate it up with this other pickup and get those 2 cream coils together. Now, if you see white debris falling while I'm doing this, these pickups are dipped in wax. It's called potting. Potting, and it's a process where they submerge this in hot wax for a little bit so the hot wax will stabilize the coils and a few other things. You can read about that somewhere else. Now, these coils have a white and a black wire coming out of them, and in this case, the screw coil, the black goes to green and the white goes to red. And so I'm going to break those connections by bringing my soldering iron in here, and I'm simply going to heat the connection and push on it. So I am going to heat that connection and then push on it, and the connection pops apart. And then, again, be careful how much tension you place on those wires while you're doing that. Try to hold them with your other hand. Now, here's the other one. I am going to heat the connection, then get underneath it and push, and the two wires have come apart. So now I have basically severed the electrical connections. Now my coil is left with its blackened wires intact on the coil, and this thing is ready to be moved. The next thing I need to do is get a Phillips head screwdriver. This is a number 1 Phillips. The regular size Phillips that you get is a number 2, and that's a little bit too big for these screws. A number 1 fits them perfectly. A jeweler's screwdriver is not really going to do it either. It's too small. I think that's called a 0 screwdriver or whatever. It does engage. Let's just see if I can get this out. Okay, perhaps a jeweler's screwdriver is just fine. This screw is made of brass, non-magnetic material. You can find out more about that in the other video that's called the long version. And now I'm going to engage this with the number 1. Number 1 screwdriver engages these screws just fine. And that's done. Now, this coil with the screws in it has screws going through the back plate. They are not threaded into the back plate, but unfortunately, between the wax and those screws passing through, it still can sometimes be a chore to get this one off. The other one pops off generally pretty easily, but this one sometimes takes some doing. So I'm going to get a screwdriver and just pry a little bit and get this coil off. I'm going to take my straight blade screwdriver and I'm going to push it up under here, under this coil bobbin, and just pry a little bit and see if I can get that to pop off. That was easier than I thought it would be. All right, well, it came right out. Now, you'll notice that it's got, the screws are passing through a metal bar, and that's just like a magnetic conductor bar, basically. It doesn't have to be there, but it helps with the magnetics of the pickup. And here's the Alnico 5 magnet down here, and that's really all I'm going to talk about that. To know more about magnetics, you'll want to look at the long version. All right, I'm just going to set this aside. Don't need that anymore. Now, this coil I want to put on this other pickup. I've already started the work on this other pickup. Now, I'm going to need to remove this black screw coil so that I can put the cream screw coil in its place. And so I'm going to have to do that same operation. Let's just see if I've already done it. It looks like I have. So the black coil is ready to remove. I'm just going to remove that and come back because this is the short version. Okay, the coil is removed, and now what we're left with is the 4-conductor wire is simply routed up under that coil on one side, kind of holds it up, and then the other side rests on the magnet. All right, so here's the cream coil, and I'm going to go ahead and drop that in place here, and luckily it's going right in mostly. Well, here's an interesting note. I couldn't get the coil to seat properly next to the other one, and so I had to clean a little bit of wax off the top of the magnet and off the bottom of this coil bobbin, the cream coil bobbin. Had to clean some wax out of there to get those to seat properly so that they are right next to each other and that they're the same level. This one was sitting a little bit high. All right, the next part of the operation is simply to resolder this green wire to the black wire coming out of the coil, and then the red wire goes to the white of this screw coil. I'm going to solder those together and then continue the process. Remember, this is the short version. If you want to see the details, you'll want to watch the video that's called long version. Okay, I soldered those two wires together, and I've soldered these two together, and in both cases, I want to clip them down pretty close to where they're just enough sticking out to where they're well soldered together. And the reason for that is because each connection has to have tape on it. If you don't tape it, let me just focus this right quick. If you don't tape it, then those can touch together, short out the coil, and your pickup will be dead. It'll be fixable, but you won't be able to play anything because that coil will be dead and it won't make any sound. Now, remember I said that these wires were generally stuffed down into the spaces that are left over between the coils. And so what I'm going to do, there's kind of a hole right there. I'm going to go ahead and start pushing these wires in there. Get my needle nose pliers and just start getting them in there the best I can. I'll show you when I'm finished. I have got the white and black wires from the slug coil pushed down into that space. And I went ahead and taped both of these other connections again so that they don't short out. And now I'm going to push them in there as well. I've got the 4 wires pushed in there now. Before I continue, what I'd like to do is set the pickup aside and get this 4-conductor wire, which I've already got ready for this procedure. And if you want to know more about it, you can watch the long version. I am going to check the continuity of the coils and the resistance and just make sure they're okay. When I go from green to red, that is the screw coil that we just reconnected. Here we go. Green to red, and I'm getting 3.83K. 3.82, close enough. And then when I go from black to white, that's the other coil, the slug coil, and that's going to measure 3.72. And if you add those together, that'll be the total DC resistance of that pickup. But now I know that everything is working right. I know that both of my coils are intact and everything is good. And so now I can tape the pickup up again. I can put tape back on it, and I'll do that right now. The tape wrap is complete. I've got this thing wrapped back with black cloth tape. Looks really good. This pickup is complete and ready to go. It's been tested. If I didn't explain why I did the coil swap, it's because I love the look of 2 cream coils, and I am vain like most guitarists. I want my guitar to sound and look the way I want, and I like double cream coils. It's a fashion statement or something. So here we have it, a Duncan SH2N Jazz neck pickup, ready to go, ready to install in my Les Paul. Again, if you want to know more details about how this operation is done, then you can watch the long version of the video. You have just watched the short version.